From the far reaches of the Milky Way galaxy, it's Retro Nerd Girl with a film review for you. Today, I'll be reviewing the movie Gandahar, released in 1987. It's also known as Light Years. The synopsis is, an evil force from 1,000 years in the future begins to destroy a paradise where citizens are in perfect harmony with nature. The story. Please forgive me for any mispronunciations I may make during this review. I did look up the names and the pronunciations, but my translation of them may not be accurate. So do keep that in mind, and I hope you won't judge me too harshly on that. For the story, this film is based on a novel, The Machine Men vs. Gandahar by Jean-Pierre Adjavon, published in 1969. French animator, screenwriter, and film director René Laloux was hired to direct this film after being famous for his cult classic film Fantastic Planet in 1973, which was adapted from a book as well. And he also did Time Masters, released in 1982. I can't wait to dive into that. All three films allow a similar visual flavor and theme. The book was adapted by René Laloux for the French version. Isaac Asimov and Raphael Cluzel worked on the dialogue for the English version of the screenplay. What we get is a fantastic fantasy set on a world locked in a time loop of 1,000 years. The story is epic and makes you wonder if this world of Gandahar was a future mutated Earth or a completely alien one. You get to decide. It's just so fascinating to me. At 1 hour and 18 minutes, wow, it's super short. But this story is jam-packed with exposition. Keep your eyes glued to this story because it has a lot to offer, especially if you enjoy intriguing time travel stories, alien civilizations, and or possible future dystopian concepts. The antagonist in the film doesn't reveal itself until it's well into a third of the film. So this is a film that requires a little extra leeway when it comes to structure. The present day of the film finds the alien-like world of Gandahar in a peaceful state until it is attacked by a force of robots, and they are not prepared. However, the problems of this world begins in the distant past, with Gandaharian scientists experimenting with eugenics to develop superior humanoid beings. It sounds like a noble task until you learn of the horrors of their results, and their society ultimately rebuked science, technology, and abruptly switched to more organic methods of survival. They even turned away from weapons because they felt that they had evolved to a more peaceful state. There would be no need for them, and they were right for a time. Gandaharian scientists created many creatures, but among them were a set of mutants called the Deformed, with psychic powers. They were shunned for their differences and exiled into the wild. Among their experiments was a brain entity called the Shapeshifter, or Metamorphosis, and that they cultured until they lost the ability to control it. They placed it in the middle of the ocean in an attempt to kill it, but it survived and continued to grow enormously. We meet Metamorphosis in the story in the present day at a docile stage and relatively pleasant to all Gandaharians. He is able to vaguely see into the future, but is unable to understand it. He knows that somehow the robots are his creation, but he doesn't know why. It behooves him that he may transform into a tyrant or godlike being to destroy Gandahar, because he still has some sentiment to it. During 1,000 years into the future, Metamorphosis cells began to die. He found that he was able to stay alive if he absorbed living cells from Gandaharians, thus killing the hosts. I believe that the cost of his immortality caused him to begin to look down on Gandaharians as a means to an end, similar to the way humans look at animals that we eat and even plants that we eat. He became bitter, calling Gandahar a civilization of pleasure for which he was shut out. He has a very good reason to be angry, but he's using his anger to feel self-righteous about killing people in order to stay alive. Metamorphosis' dead cells turned into metal, which he used to make the robots I spoke of earlier, embedding them with a small piece of himself. His robots are his soldiers, turning Gandaharians into stone, capturing them to be sacrificed for their creator. All the while, over 1,000 years, the lush and beautiful land of Gandahar transforms into a dark dystopian wasteland, where even the sun has been shut out. Eventually, Gandaharians became extinct in this time, so Metamorphosis created a time portal to go back in time and capture Gandaharians from 1,000 years before his reign, which is the present day where the film begins. It's a lot to take in and possibly convoluted, but I have to say that I love this premise so much. The challenge is formidable, and I'm very impressed by it. In the present day, there is a gathering at the city of Jasper, where the ruling council of women orders the leader's son, Sylvain, to find out what's going on. There isn't much about Sylvain. He doesn't have layers, but he is the protagonist, setting the battle up between good and evil. He has been trained to be the champion of Gandahar, and he simply does it. Sylvain meets the deformed, and they explain how they are Gandaharians too, and pledge themselves to save their world. They are inspired by a poem that they have foreseen in their future. In 1,000 years, Gandahar is destroyed, and all of its people killed. 1,000 years ago, Gandahar will be saved, and what can't be avoided will be. As well, because of this, the deformed speak in the present and the past simultaneously. They call it the past-future way of speaking and believing. Next, Sylvain meets Ariel, who has just survived the abduction of her people. Nearly immediately, the couple has a romantic relationship, and they travel the journey together. It perhaps is a little fast, but I figured that the trauma of the robot attacks may have been the reason Ariel attaches herself to Sylvain so quickly. I think that the main reason the audience roots for Sylvain to succeed is because we want to stop the suffering of the Gandaharians. This is one instance where the threat from the challenge is so intense that it is the basis for the empathy. Make the suffering stop. Now, there isn't much technical information available for this film. I did, however, manage to find out that French comic artist Philippe Kazumaju worked very closely with René Laloux. Laloux also worked with SEK Animation Studio of North Korea. Where this film really excels is the depth of artistry for the landscapes and spectacular creature designs. It really gives you the impression that you're looking at the glorious wonders of an alien world. There was so much detail in the color palette of blues, purples, and pinks, providing contrasts when necessary. The designs of the deformed were quite unique, like placing many eyes on a person's body in unusual places, or a person's mouths all over a body. It was freaky and weird. Again, the creative concept designs helped to sell the terrors of genetic experimentation and the results of those who dare to play God. I thought that the design of the metamorphosed creature was another creative achievement of wild grandeur, and I enjoyed that it was very trippy, psychedelic, and fun. Honestly, how do you draw and animate a biological creature that can suck you up into its own consciousness? Have a conversation with you, and you can ride through it like a carnival attraction. It was brilliant. As well, the Metal Men robots of the future was another design that I really enjoyed, embracing motifs with black exterior metal and the red dot at the center of their chest. Their appearance made them intimidating, but combined with their marching in unison, it looked like it was something out of a nightmare. One aspect to know before indulging in Lelou's Fantastic Planet is that this film features quite a bit of nudity. It is not placed in the film as a means to indicate sexual desire, but it's naturalistic culture that the Gandaharians have adopted. I rather enjoyed that, and I thought that that was very unique to put it in the culture that way. It's the same as in Fantastic Planet. Lebanese-French composer Gabriel Yared created a wonderful orchestral score for the French version. The English release had a progressive 80s rock soundtrack in an attempt to please American audiences. It helped in a way to create a trippy feel to some of the scenes. In addition, the score was created by Jack Maybe, Bob Jewett, and Jim Klein. Depending on the version you get, you'll experience the film slightly differently, but I think both versions are pretty entertaining in their own right. And no other area is that apparent than when it came to the vocal performances. The English version had John Shea, Jennifer Grey, Christopher Plummer, Glenn Close, Earl Hammond, and Teller from Penn and Teller. The French version had Pierre-Marie Escourou, Catherine Cavalier, George Wilson, Annie Dupree, Pierre Ducos, and Christine Paris. The climax is actually the area of the film that weaves a lot of the story together in the last act. I am just going to go through a little play-by-play with you to talk about some of my feelings about this part. Sylvain is ordered to kill Metamorphosis with a special syringe, but when he arrives to carry out the plan, he finds Metamorphosis wants to help him. He tells Sylvain that he is too strong at the present day to kill with the syringe, but in 1,000 years, he will be weak enough to be affected by it. So he puts Sylvain into a sleep to awaken in 1,000 years. It's one of the biggest surprises of the story, and henceforth it ramps up the tension as we see the horrors of the future. Luckily, Metamorphosis has no taste for consuming the deformed, so they actually become the heroes of Gandahar, helping Sylvain to defeat Metamorphosis and free the remaining humans left. They all escape through the portal to arrive in the proper time they belong in, fulfilling the prophecy that in 1,000 years Gandahar will be doomed and saved. I loved that story element. It makes this story really stand out among the many time travel stories in the genre, and it's so fantastic. This film was very popular in France, but the US release was not as successful. As well, the titles were different, and which is why you may find the film listed under The Light Years. It isn't the best title because at least Gandahar is the name of the world the story takes place in. It was named Light Years because it was the tagline used on the French poster. A lot of people were lost by the title alone. As well, the renaming caused confusion and is still causing confusion to this day as to which movie it is. It was also edited so it could have a PG rating in the US, which changes a lot of the story. In 2007, we finally got a DVD release of Gandahar in French with the English subtitles, so we can enjoy both versions of the film. I didn't see the American version when it was released, and I don't remember ever seeing any ads for it. However, over the years, I saw stills of the film and the poster, which had me quite intrigued. I believe I first saw this film about a decade ago and loved it. I didn't get a chance to see it again until it popped up on YouTube, and I was lucky enough to see both versions of it. I am not the biggest fan of time travel films because at times it is abused to fix difficult problems and consequences. But here it was used as the means to display a clever paradox in time. It's not a classic tale of a hero, but a broader tale of good versus evil, and how Metamorphosis, as dynamic of a character as he was, had transformed into the evil that he became. This evil emerged from the best intentions of the scientists of Gandahar's past. They realized their mistakes, but instead of dealing with the consequences, they banished and ignored their creations. It's a cautionary tale about the dangers of playing God in manners we barely understand. The film is representing the idea that the pursuit should not be abandoned, but approached with the most care and ethics to the lives that they may affect positively or negatively. I adored this message. Metamorphosis mirrors his creators by becoming a god among the metal men he creates, finding superiority above all other life. The deformed were the personification of the downtrodden of civilization. It is not just in the story, but everywhere in the world we see today in our world. They are the forgotten, and the Gandaharians wanted them to be unseen as they were reminders that their perfect world was flawed. Ironically, many of these unwanted Gandaharians became partly heroes in this story, risking their lives to save the land that they love. My hope is that they could then, by the end of the film, have lived openly together in peace. I just can't praise the story enough for the complexity of ideas represented in this film, as well as delivering on an abundance of creativity in the design of this world. Gandahar is the title and the main character in the story, in my opinion. What a lovely tale. My rating is a 9.1. Well, that sums up my review. I hope you liked it, and if you did, I've got over 100 of these, so go on ahead and browse the channel to see more reviews from me like this. I also do regular live streams Wednesdays, Fridays, and Saturdays, so you can join me and be a part of the conversation. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and hit the bell icon to be the very first to be notified of my next video. This is Retro Nerd Girl signing off. Take care, movie lovers. I'm off to my next review.